What's up, guys? Today I want to take a look at the iPhone 7 in 2022. So this is always an interesting phone and one of my favorite iPhones to always revisit. One, because of the price is so cheap on here. You can find this for around $100, which is pretty crazy. Because I always kind of recommend this phone to people who are, kind of diehard Android fans, but they sort of want to get into iOS, but you want to spend like the least money as possible, right? So this is like, you can find this for 100 and less now. These are very cheap phones. And what's always interesting about these older iPhones is that this phone came out, I believe, in 2017. I would say 16 actually, 2016, and this phone is still running iOS 15.5. The latest version of iOS is actually on here. And I was just always amazed with that because for such an older phone, Apple does a great job with software support. It's really just there's no comparison if you compare it to any Android device from 2016. They are not getting updates. So that's always sort of the unique thing about these older iPhones is that you get this crazy long software support. All right, so I want to talk about this phone. Can you still use this phone in 2022? Is it a good buy? Me personally, if you guys have the extra money, I would say go for like an iPhone SE 2020 because a lot of people like this body style. A lot of people like having the Touch ID button. I would say add an extra $100, go with the SE 2020, or add an extra $50 and go with an iPhone 8 for that stronger chip. But this is still a pretty good phone for $100 for anybody that's on like an extreme budget, right? You just have $100 to spend. You want to give it to a kid or something like that. This is really not a bad option. Like I said, anybody that wants to get introduced to iOS, they want to get introduced to the iMessage and FaceTime and stuff like that. Definitely, I would recommend this for that since it's such a cheap phone. Now, the body style is actually one of my favorite designs of all time. So Apple has this sort of matte finish on the iPhone 7 here. So you never see fingerprints on here. It's always just a super clean looking device here. It's full aluminum. The whole body is full aluminum on here, which is just awesome. I really do love the look of this. And of course, it feels very comfortable in the hand. Now this phone does have IP67 dust and water resistance, so you can get it wet, no problem. And also the screen on here, it's a Retina IPS display, and it's 4.7 inches, 720p plus, and 326 for the PPI. The screen still looks fairly sharp even in 2022. I don't have any issues with that. The only thing you could say about the screen, which honestly it really doesn't matter because the iPhone SE, I believe the 2022 version, that phone still actually has the same design, literally the same design. So it doesn't bother people too much. And like I said, a lot of people prefer having Touch ID instead of the Face ID, for that minority of people. But yeah, so I really do think the design, I guess it's a little dated, of course, in 2022, but honestly, I guess it's fine for most people because Apple's still selling those iPhone SEs. So I do want to go ahead and talk about, is this phone bright enough as well too? Because I was sort of outdoors when I was taking photos, and like it's not super hard to see outdoors, but I wish the screen was just a little bit brighter on here. But like I've noticed with a lot of IPS panels, they're not as bright as these OLED panels that we're seeing today. But yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about that. So let's talk about the software. So this phone is running iOS 15.5. I believe this phone should get iOS 16, which is absolutely crazy. Now, iOS 16 should be the last update for this phone. But like I said, that's absolutely crazy that this phone launched with iOS 10, I think. And it's just crazy that it's going to get 6 whole years. It could get another year updates. Who knows? But everything still works on here pretty well as far as the widgets and as far as performance for $100. It's not like it's super slow or laggy and stuff like that. Now, yes, I test a lot of the newer phones and a little bit more powerful older flagship. I can sort of tell the difference a little bit. It is a little bit slower compared to those newer phones, but really, the optimization on iOS, with this chip, just does a pretty solid job. So I can't really complain about performance for 100 bucks. It's not like it's stuttering, jittering all over the place. I think for the average person, like just me going and just web browsing and stuff like that, trying to find wallpapers and stuff, it runs pretty smoothly. So like I didn't have an issue with performance. I thought like, you know, updating this phone, I was like, oh, it's gonna start lagging eventually, but it's actually still pretty fast. Like for basic tasks and stuff like that, flying in and out of applications and stuff, it's actually a somewhat fast phone. You do get those occasional jitters and stutters, but it's really not as bad as you would think. So that is one thing that kind of surprised me with this phone. Now let's talk about the chipset a little bit more on this phone. So we are running the Apple A10 chip. And then we have 32 gigs of internal storage and 2 gigs of RAM. One of the things that I noticed about this phone is not even when gaming does this phone kind of heat up and get kind of hot. Now you may not notice that because a lot of people have cases on their phone, but if you just use the phone bare, yeah, it kind of heats up kind of weirdly. But all of those older iPhones kind of get hot. And with these settings here, you can see there's no option for extreme FPS. So you can see that the chip, you know, has aged. Gaming, as far as like PUBG, you can see it's a little bit jittery. That's why I said, like, if you really want like this body style and smaller iPhone, you go for like an iPhone 8 or SE. But it seems like for casual gaming, like the game that I was playing, like Subway Surfer, that works fine. But as far as PUBG, yeah, you can get away with playing it. But just know that you might experience like those frame drops and stuff like that. Like I said, just looking at it now, it's not like super laggy or anything like that. It's actually playable. But if you're somebody that is actually heavily into, you know, the whole gaming thing, then I would probably go for an iPhone 8 or an iPhone SE. But this is capable of actually playing games. And like I was saying, with games that are more casual, like less demanding, like Subway Surfs for example, these games actually play pretty well. So I don't really notice a lot of stuttering and stuff with these type of games. Anything that's a little bit more demanding, you'll see like occasional like little frame drops here and there. All right, so I do want to show you guys the Geekbench scores for everybody that is curious about those. So you can see those are the Geekbench scores, which actually aren't that bad. I think I have some Antutu scores for this phone as well. So you can see not terrible. It's still, like I said, in real world use, it's still fairly snappy phone, and it does decent when it comes to gaming and all that stuff. The iPhone 7 does have these stereo speakers on here, and I got them at max volume, so they sound still pretty good.
I hope you know I won't be sitting back and letting you pull any.
So even when you cover this one, so I think the speaker quality is still pretty good on the iPhone 7. As far as like it having like the super hard hitting bass and stuff like that, like the 10Rs and stuff like that, it's not quite as good as those phones, but I think if you cover this one, you know, like a lot of people do, you still get really decent sound out of this top speaker. So I do want to talk about the main reason a lot of people like these types of phones is these Touch ID, which works flawlessly. For those who have to have a physical home button, yes, it is always, you know, a satisfying feeling to be able to, you know, have something to physically click, and that feels great there. So I do want to go ahead and touch on the cameras. So the cameras are pretty interesting. I could kind of see the, you know, the cameras on here aging a bit. If you take it out of any type of good lighting, the images are a little bit soft. But actually, you know, it's not terrible. It's a 12 megapixel standard. I think that's also one of the things that's kind of aged. It only has one single lens on here. And then you also have 4K 30 video, which is not bad. And then 7 megapixel selfie, which is also actually not that bad in good lighting. But like I said, you take this phone out of any type of good lighting, images become soft. You know, dynamic range is not as good. But you'll be surprised that, you know, this phone still takes somewhat decent photos, as you can see. So like I said, of course you're not gonna expect top quality photos from this phone at this price point, but I thought the video and the image quality, I thought it was still somewhat decent. I didn't think it was terrible at all. Alright, so lastly, the battery life on this phone, and it's really the same as all these older small iPhones. So if you check your battery health, you can see mine is saying that it's significantly degraded. So this one is around 83%, which is actually not terrible. I mean, it's not that good, but it's, it's not that great either. This phone at this battery percent will probably last around like 3 hours, 30 minutes. If you had one at 100%, you would get that full probably 4 hours and 30 minutes, which is not a full day's use. This is like, these are phones that you kind of have to charge throughout the day. But other than that, that's kind of the price you pay for these compact phones. But yeah, so this is still a very interesting phone in 2022. I'm surprised that it's still running iOS 15 like a champ. And it gets iOS 16. I think that's even more impressive. Also, I thought the cameras weren't terrible, and also, it's just a pretty decent device for the price point. So, what do you guys think? I'll catch you guys in the next one.